Welcome back to Benny's Custom Works, proudly supported by Driveline and Sparesbox. Don't forget BCW5 on checkout. This week we're back on the Sigma, but we're not just going to be on the Sigma today. We've only got a few little tasks to do today. We do have another yoke from Daniel's Engineering. Thanks again to those guys because they have been a massive help. And we've also got the chin spoiler. I jumped the gun and painted it and did all the fiberglass on that because it took me 3 days and you guys don't want to see me struggle painting. If you do want to see some cool painting done properly, go and see Home Built by Jeff. He's currently painting his Alpha. That thing's pretty cool and I can't wait to see that thing go back together because Jeff always does really cool stuff. But we're going to be doing Sigma things and then we're also going to be doing things on Gian's Falcon again. It's still having power steering problems, the woe of a Falcon owner, it seems. So today we're going to be doing a new steering rack, or a used steering rack, an Astra pump. So anyone who's interested in the Astra pump conversion, stick around because we're going to cover all of that. Now we've also got another set of front knuckles or front uprights. I was never 100% happy with drilling those holes the way we did it. So I've actually had Paulie, some of you guys probably remember Paulie from doing Cresta things back in the day. He actually has the original tooling and original reams from TRW when they were based in Australia. So the correct tapers have actually been re-drilled in those arms. So now they're as per factory as much as you can get. So we should have no issues with those going forward. But yeah, we're going to be smashing into both cars today. So let's dive on in, straight up with a tail shaft, then some front lip. Then we're going to do Falcon things. Woo! Oh, going down to old Backtown. Oh God, doesn't get better. Oh, the moment of truth, let's test the new yoke. 17R-3-2498, which is described as a Holden slip yoke. 24 spline, 1.06 inches, which should refer to the OD, I believe, not the spline. Keep all the packaging in case you have to send it back. I'm quietly confident. Nailed it. It's heaps better. It's almost like it fits this time. That's mint. Nice. So now we get to actually build a tail shaft today. As I mentioned in the previous episode, we do have a new uni as well. So we're going to be doing the front uni today and obviously the slip yoke. And then I might even paint it. We'll see how we feel. But if you're going to paint these slip yokes, you need to make sure that you clean off all of the transit rust inhibitor because you will never ever get paint to stick to that. Uni. Nailed it. When you're putting your unis together, there's a few things to keep in mind. A lot of unis these days will actually have a grease nipple on one of the four caps. Before you assemble it, you really want to take it off and drop it like that because it makes it heaps easier to find. But yeah, you do definitely want to remove it because you generally tap the end of this cap to install it. And you're most likely going to damage that. Another way to install these is to use a socket and a bench vise, which is probably the way we're going to do it today. Also, it's worth keeping in mind that these are full of needle roller bearings, so you do need to be very mindful when you go to fit it that the needles don't displace or fall out because they will get trapped in the bottom of the cap and there's no way you'll ever assemble it correctly. And if you do manage to force it together, it's basically going to eat itself to death within 100 Ks. So yeah, you do need to be very mindful of that. This one's actually feeling a little bit funky. I think it's probably just got some sort of transit grease in it. So we may actually clean that out and put some proper grease in it before we fit these two because I don't always trust some of this grease that comes with stuff. Subaru wheel bearings are a prime example of that. The grease that comes in those is actually not rated for wheel bearings to be driven on. So I would highly recommend when you get a wheel bearing that's not a sealed type to actually wash it out and use a high temp or high pressure grease because you're going to shorten the life of your parts if you don't. So yeah, by the time you spend all the time and money and effort fitting these or fitting wheel bearings or whatnot, yeah, it's definitely going to pay off to re-grease them before you install them because it's more or less to protect the materials, much like the lubricant on this, so they don't corrode in transit rather than actually being the correct lubricant for the application. Do it and you'll be happy. And now I just got to find this nipple. Oh God, it's a long way down. Oh, I'm so old. heavy duty unis won't have this grease like the solid, the hollow unis. Like the real heavy duty ones will actually just be solid. And the only way to re-grease the uni cups is to actually pull it apart and clean and re-grease them, which is a job I need to do on the Cresta actually. But I'm almost at the point where you just pull it, if you're going to pull it apart, you put new unis in it. It's not worth pulling it apart and then potentially damaging something. And that's what I was talking about before with little rollers getting trapped in the bottom of the cap. That can happen when you're actually trying to reassemble it, and there's no way that that will ever seat correctly. Best case, that thing smashes to pieces. Worst case, it just eats the whole joint to pieces, but either way, the joint's basically ruined at that point, so it's definitely worth making sure that they go back in properly. This is the part I don't like, because you can't always see, well, you can't see what's going on inside anymore. So I try and get the uni engaged in both sides. Like that's now to the point where you can get full engagement across both parts of the joint. So it pretty much tells you that they're aligned correctly. We've got both of our caps in this yoke now. I've actually basically overextended the cap on this side to get the snap ring on easily. So now we're actually going to go over to the bench vise and use the socket just to press this to get the correct depth so we can get our snap ring on internally. Different unis also use, or different yokes I should say, use different styles of snap ring. This particular one uses an internal snap ring. Some other yokes have the groove machined in the yoke to actually use the snap ring to hold the cap in. A lot of Ford products like 9-inch stuff is like that. Or also aftermarket, I think the Strange yokes for Turbo 400 are like that, and also they're back yokes as well. So worth keeping in mind, looking at how this is assembled before you kind of bash it all together. But in this particular setup, all of the snap rings are internal, so you've actually got to fully compress it, get it on, and then set the depth of it. Or that's the way I do it anyway, set the depth of it using the other side. But that's pretty much how we do it. We're going to go over the vise now, compress it, put the snap ring on, then we're going to split the old yoke out of the new shaft, or the shaft, and swap this one in and do the same thing all over again. So that's our depth all correctly set. Just got to put our snap ring in and then it'll find its home. Puts the snap ring. Yeah, see, all of them have kind of exploded out. The joint looks in okay condition, but like I said, we're already changing this. I think we'll just send that one to God. This is a very stressful job because if you lose, like I said, if you lose one of these, you're stuffed. Oh, yeah. I'm fortunate enough that I could raid them out of the old uni if I had to, but sometimes you don't have that luxury. I wonder if there's heaps of like old school mechanic shops with just buckets full of old unis just for this reason. I wonder if the needles are the same across a lot of unis or if they're all specific. Now, while this may be obvious to a lot of people, it is worth keeping in mind every time you are repairing or remedying a driveline or any fluid leak for that matter, make sure that you actually check the fluid level when you finish the repair and top up as necessary. That gearbox, although it didn't look like it had actually leaked a lot, took about 400 mil to actually get it back to the correct level. So without correcting that, potentially down the road, there could have been issues with this transmission. But it's definitely worth keeping in mind every time you're doing a seal or a leak or any kind of reseal to check the level when you're finished, because that 400 mil may be the difference between that box going for another 10 years and not. So definitely keep that in mind. Now we're going to do the lip. Get all the dirt build up off it so it's not mashing junk into this beaver panel forever. I did rattle can it black. It is going to get painted body colour later. Actually, that's worth keeping in mind. If you are going to paint something yourself and going to get it professionally painted later, consult your painter as to what paint they recommend or they're happy to paint over. My painter has recommended we do this in acrylic, which is what we've done, so that later on he can just hit this with a bit of 2K primer and then the colour, and it'll be happy days. The two are cross compatible. Enamel and other paints aren't cross compatible back to 2K. Inversely, sometimes you can't go from 2K to some of those other paints, so definitely worth keeping in mind if you're going to get something professionally painted later, to speak to your painter before you do the shortcut rattle can deal, because it may be the difference between a $200 job or an $800 job if they've got to completely strip all the paint you've put onto your component. It's on now. So a few keen-eyed viewers may notice that the screws aren't evenly spaced. The reason behind that is primarily actually to just keep some pressure and tension on that repair. So basically these two screws here were either side of the original repair, and those are the original Cleco holes that we used. So all I've done was drill those to 4mm and then use some sheet metal screws. These are actually stainless steel screws as well, so they'll never rust. Also, if you're going to drill holes in bodywork, just give it a quick touch up with a paintbrush or whatnot. We've already done those holes before, so yeah, they're all sorted. But tech screws will, or self-tapping screws will actually pull the paint back out of them. So yeah, also worth maybe potentially even back painting that. But because I'm going to remove this and get it painted sooner rather than later, I'll do all of that when it's for the final fit, once it's painted the right color and all that sort of stuff sorted. But now we're going to get this thing on the ground and bring the Falcon in and punish myself making power steering things work. Woo! I was wondering where we can put the power steering pump, but I reckon we might be able to do the sneaky, like in this general area. Beautifuls. Yeet. Don't need that anymore. Do you mind if I weld your strut tower?
You do.
Oh, not the Falcon collectability. All the purity will be gone. I'm literally only putting this back in so the horrible smell goes away. It's worth explaining why I've actually changed this top pulley. Apart from the fact the bearing's dead, these plastic pulleys actually have a habit of dying in high performance cars. We learned pretty early on with the Cresta that these things are no good. So we've used a steel one, which is actually the same idler as our Barra power steering delete kit. We're also going to be using one of those today. So the next thing is going to be to remove our power steering pump altogether, because we're converting this to an Astra pump. So basically the plan from here on out is to remove the pump, put all of our belt drive back on. It's worth noting too that currently our belt drive kit doesn't support aircon functionality, but we are working on a new upgrade for that. So going forward, you will be able to run your aircon and no power steering if you'd like to. But yeah, we're still finalising belt lengths and stuff like that. So, but yeah, we're going to keep smashing this thing out, and hopefully by the end of the day we'll have power steering and a happy Gian. Woo! More woo. There's been lots of woos today. I feel like I'm a woo girl. Split. I'm glad you mowed your lawn, bro. Sick. They wind the stud in because this is tapped, and then they just put a big tack weld on there so you can't actually wind the studs out of the cross member. It's a strange concept, but I mean, I suppose the good thing is if you had to change them, you just cut that. You can just get that, like cut the end of that off and wind it back out. If you have a digital torque wrench, always store it without the batteries in it, because invariably these batteries do fail, especially when they've been sitting for a while. And if they die inside your torque wrench, that's a bad time. I mean, there's potential to put it there, but it'd be nice to put it in a similar position to original because you basically got the line lengths being quite similar.
What colour did you say this pump's out of?
Holden Astra. It's the only usable part from an Astra. As much as it's a brace to the car, it's also going to stiffen this part of the bracket. This is a don't blow up your car anti-zap for welding, so you don't have to disconnect batteries and stuff. It's pretty handy. Rate my weld in the comments. Pretty happy with that one. Because this power steering system runs such high pressure, we're not actually going to make this high pressure hose out of racework style hose. So all I'm going to do today is actually use just a push lock -6 fitting, and this is our hose length. So all I've done basically is fit the push fitting onto the rack, got our hose length, and this end's actually just a straight fitting anyway. So we're just going to take this down to the local hose manufacturer, and they're going to make it out of 3000 PSI hydraulic line instead of the -6 we normally use. Conveniently, AN and JIC are basically exactly the same fitting. So a 3/8 JIC is a -6 AN line. So we'll just go down and get them to make them out of steel fittings, and it will hold 3000 plus PSI and hopefully never explode. Fingers crossed.
Oh, is that your knuckles?
Yep. The main larger cables are the power and ground for this, so all we need to do is pick up an accessory signal. So the wiper motor will be fine for that, because it's literally just, it's like the wire you'd use to turn on a relay, like signal a relay. This is going to be a long episode.
Yeah.
Thanks for sticking around. It's the fuse, so it's a 100 amp fuse. So just to protect the circuit basically. And it's also a convenient wire joiner. So there's a nice little 100 amp, like a blade fuse, almost like the fusible links you to get sort of OEM. So yeah, pretty neat little inline holder. There's no extra. The thing I like about this as opposed to a lot of the larger fuse holders you get is you don't have 4 inches of cable or 100mm cable hanging out of each side that you then got to join to. Like they're just little 6mm bolts. So you just use a 6mm terminal onto your desired gauge of cable, and then that'll go, no worries. The Astra pumps can actually draw up to 75 amps in operation. So I've gone to a 100 amp fuse for protection. An 80 amp fuse is probably right on the threshold, and I can't find a 90 amp fuse, so 100 will be fine for protecting the circuit. If this cable went to ground, it'd pull 100 amps pretty quickly, so it'll pop that fuse, no worries. That being said, the cable run's actually quite short, so it shouldn't really have an issue. But yeah, it's good to be prepared in these situations because you don't want your car to burn to the ground, because a cable of that gauge or larger going to ground is definitely going to start a fire, or at least cause some pretty serious damage, either to the electricals in your bay or could potentially short out and burn a hole in a chassis rail or something. They have that much current flow that it can definitely do pretty serious damage. There is a calculation that you can work out the current draw. Rule of thumb normally is about 20% over your current draw for a protection, but sometimes you can't always get the exact correct current rating for a cable, so for a fuse, I should say. So sometimes it's just kind of whatever you can get on the day. Always remember to plug the fans back in, because I've forgotten before, and it's a time when you do. Supercharger! Oh, that's luscious. Ning, 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 ning. Well, that's us pretty much wrapped up for the day. We've got a lot of little jobs ticked off on both the cars again, the tail shaft and the front lip sorted on the Siggy, and then the power steering conversion on this. We've also changed the knuckles, done a few other bits and pieces. Massive thanks to Paulie actually for drilling the knuckles out for us and putting the correct taper in them. While the straight holes were working okay, I was never entirely confident in them. So yeah, finding out that he had the correct tooling to do it properly was, I think that's definitely the way forward to do it correctly. So yeah, we've replaced those again today. Total cost on that was like $200 getting the knuckles, and then a few other bits and pieces. We've also done the wheel bearings as well. The new knuckles that we got, one of them was pretty notchy anyway, and I didn't really want to bother swapping used ones on. They're not an expensive part. I think they're about $100 a piece. So yeah, definitely worthwhile if you're mucking around the front of a Falcon. Just buy some new hubs. If you do happen to take a second handy off, that's not too bad. We're just going to keep one as a spare in our drift spare kit for the car. The old knuckles are actually just going to be spares as well, because I'd rather use that at the track than a bent one. So yeah, that's probably a good short-term fix. The rack is a bit iffy that came out of this, but I'm not 100% sure if the pump or the rack was more of the issue. So yeah, we're going to keep that rack as a spare as well, because that may get us out of trouble at the track one day. But that's pretty much us done for the day. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.